So the idea of and I think that most of you already know, and I won't stay much on the technical things, because I think it's important to see that we start from the same idea. I'm pretty sure that most of you have already known about the discussions today, the topics and so on. But let me try to bring you with this full comprehensive look on what we are doing here on the enhanced transparency framework, on the reporting and so on. Just one second. Now I did something. Oh, this is why it's not. Okay. Okay, perfect. At the time where the things are switching. So looking at the why we are here, why we are talking about reporting. And the first thing is to set a bit the scene on the Paris Agreement. And the whole idea on the Paris Agreement was this continuous long-term process in which we look of how the countries are supposed to implement that. And first you look at the planning stage. And the planning stage started with the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions of countries under Article 4 of the Paris Agreement. And then together with this, parties were requested to provide adaptation communications and other communications on finance. And that was the planning stage. You see in the middle, we have the long-term temperature goal, the objective of the Paris Agreement. And these are the three steps that come to it. It's first the planning from the countries, and then moving to the implementation phase from the countries, where they put together their mitigation, adaptation actions, means of implementation, and so on. And then the circle ends with the review process, in which part of this is the enhanced transparency framework, the compliance system, and the global stocktake. And you see, this is how the circle ends. So you plan, you implement, and then you have to report, and the information that you reported is getting reviewed. I think I'm changing only that slide. Okay. Now, again, looking more on this idea of what is behind and how the process works in terms of the enhanced transparency framework, the NDCs, the links between nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, the enhanced transparency framework, and the global stocktake. So you see the NDCs are being prepared by countries, the implementation, the preparation and communication of them. The next ones will be coming in February next year. So there's a lot of work now in countries to prepare the next NDCs. And the GST, the global stocktake, just happened in Dubai in the last conference of parties. Again, the next one will be coming in 5 years. In the meantime, you have the enhanced transparency framework that requires the countries to provide their biennial transparency reports, which will be coming every 2 years. So it's quite important to set this process that starts basically in December 2024 with the first submission of the biennial transparency reports. And this comes together with the accounting and tracking progress of how the parties implemented their NDC and what are the emissions of parties and what are their information on the support they either provided or received. It's important to have this as a view of how this circle ends from the NDC process, the enhanced transparency framework, and the global stocktake. So you have this kind of overview every 5 years of how the world progresses by looking at the submission, official submission from parties. And this comes every 5 years under the global stocktake. Now, a little bit on the difference between we call them the shall requirements and the should requirements. So in the modalities, procedures, and guidelines under the enhanced transparency framework, and these were coming in the later conference of parties after Paris. This one's happened in Katowice. There are different sets of requirements. Some of them, they apply for all parties, and you can see them on the screen, especially on the idea to report the greenhouse gas emissions, the national inventory of greenhouse gas emissions. This is for all parties, and this is a shall requirement. So this is obligatory for all countries. Then all parties also, they should report. So this is not a strong obligation, but it's an important obligation for many countries to report climate change impacts and adaptation. Part of the shall requirements is also to report the progress in implementing the NDC. So shall requirements, greenhouse gas inventory, NDC progress, how the party is progressing in implementing the NDC. A should requirement, which again, it's for all parties, is on climate change adaptation and impacts. Now, looking on the other side of the slide, you have the developed country parties that have also a very strong requirement to report on the support that they have provided to other countries. And we are talking about the financial support, technology, and capacity building. And this is a very strong requirement for developed countries to report on the support that they have provided. Now, it's also an important thing for the developing countries this time to report on the same support that they have received and they need. And I will stop here for a moment for you to understand, and I will come back to it later in the presentation. It's important to share with the world the needs of countries. Yes, this is a should requirement. It's not mandatory. Nobody will come and say, you have not provided this. But I think this is one of the key areas that the parties need to provide, because it will be important for the developed countries, for the donors, financial institutions, to see the needs of countries. Especially, this is coming from the developing countries. Now, looking again on this, I was already explaining about the modalities, procedures, and guidelines for the enhanced transparency framework. And this is, you see the decision from the Katowice COP. This is the outline. This is what you will see in the document. So if you go and you look at this decision, you will see different aspects that are, let's say, separated on the subject. So you have a section on the national inventory report of emissions, in which there's a lot of information of what the parties are supposed to provide. What is the reporting requirements? Then another section on tracking your progress in implementing and achieving the nationally determined contribution. Same separate section on the climate change impacts and adaptation. And as I mentioned before, there are two sections one for countries that will provide this support, financial, technology, and capacity building support that they have provided and mobilized, and one that mostly affects the developing countries that they will have to report on the support that they need and they have received. Then there is also quite detailed explanation and provisions on the technical expert review, which is the step of the process after the reporting, and the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress, which is the last step in implementing the ETF. And you will see it in the next slides. So this is the architecture of the enhanced transparency framework. We are coming more and more on the topic of this 3-day event. We are looking at 3 steps again. We see the same kind of circle that needs to close. We start from the reporting, and this is the phase in which we are today for many countries. There is this request to provide the biennial transparency reports by 31st of December this year. And this is looking on the availability of regular data on countries, greenhouse gas emissions, policies and measures, projections of these emissions, the progress towards the plans that the parties put together, impacts, adaptation. Everything needs to be in this biennial transparency reports. And it's important to be specific. It is important to be quite comprehensive in the way the reports are coming. As I said before, the first BTRs will probably in history look as the worst BTRs. And if you look at what developed countries have done in the last 20, 25, 30 years, and if you look at the first reports that they submitted maybe 25 years ago, you will see exactly the same thing. You will see that the first reports were just the first try. It's the first thing that parties do. You don't need to worry that it's not perfect, because that's one of the important things to clarify now. And this is part of the things that we keep saying. It is important to report. Yes, it's also important what is in the report, but the report will not be perfect. There will be time to work to improve. And you will see I have further slides on this. So that's the first part of the cycle, the reporting part. But this is not the final part. We have 2 more steps. First is the review of the information. And this is starting exactly this week. As we speak, we have our colleagues together with international independent experts in Andorra. Andorra was the first country that submitted the biennial transparency report to the Secretariat. And currently, their review of the first biennial transparency report is happening in this week in Andorra. We have our colleagues there performing what will happen also for all countries. So all the biennial transparency reports that will come to the Secretariat will have to be reviewed. And the review process we can discuss further on while we are here. It's basically bringing together some international experts that were trained and passed some exams on how to do these reviews, and bringing them to the country and sitting with the experts that produced the biennial transparency report, looking at the numbers, looking at the information provided, discussing together, and making sure that there is this comprehensive review of the biennial transparency report. Then this process ends with a report, but it doesn't end there, because you see we have one more step in the process, and this is the consideration of this report. And the idea of consideration, it's also not new for us. This is not new. This process has worked under the convention. in some cases under the Kyoto Protocol. And the consideration of progress is some of the process is something that is very important for countries. It's the way when you are sharing the experiences, the best practices, and the lesson learned in front of other parties. And how it works, usually during the climate negotiations, there is a specific time and place for countries to provide a presentation on their report, and then on the review of the report, and other countries interacting and putting questions, responding to the question. So it's quite a live process in which you no longer have a group of experts asking questions and reviewing the information, but you have other countries. You have parties in a room like this that are interacting with the party that was reviewed. Now, looking at the fundamentals of the ETF, and I will show you all of them together, we have these 5 principles, 5 fundamentals, and I have already mentioned this several times by now. This is not something new. For many countries, I think I could easily think that for most of the countries, this is not something new. One way or another, countries have reported under the Climate Convention to the Secretariat either their national communication or biennial update reports or greenhouse gas emissions. This was done before, and this basically continues. The requirements on the Paris Agreement are not very different. Now, of course, the process will be for every country in a similar way from now on every 2 years. So one of the first principles is that we are building on an enhancement of the things that were already done. Then another thing that I mentioned before is this continuous improvement. Every year or every 2 years, your next BTR will be better. And your process of reporting, because this is one of the key areas where I usually stop to make it clear for parties. It happened in the past that parties engaged consultants and had some support from different agencies. Consultants came to the country. They provided the national communication or biennial update report, and then they left. This is something that can work once, but it won't work all the time. What is important now is to build capacity in the country, to speak with each other. The thing that the Paris Agreement does is that it doesn't prescribe the institutional arrangements, but it asks parties to report on their national arrangement. And what does national arrangement means? Basically, it's all the processes that are done in the country for which you will be able to generate these reports every 2 years. In some countries, it is very simple. Agencies, institutions, ministries, they collaborate with each other, and the information is flowing to the Ministry of Environment or the Agency of Environment that is producing the reports, the estimates of greenhouse gas emissions or the Biennial Transparency Report. In other countries, this is not so easy flowing. So you will need a governmental decree, a governmental decision, even a law in some countries to make sure that the information comes. And this is also quite important because from now on, every 2 years, you will have to provide this report. And this is, it's not an easy process. So you need to put together institutional arrangements in the country to make sure that this is going to happen every 2 years. It's not one time. It's not like in the past where countries were providing a biennial update report and then the next one will come in 4 years, or there is not such a strong deadline. From now on, it should be every 2 years. So for you to be able to do it every 2 years, the moment you are sending the first one, you will have to start working on the second one, because this is how much it takes for you to prepare your estimates of emissions, your reports. So this is the way it goes. And there will be a continuous improvement as long as you have these arrangements in the country, this institutional arrangement. These are very important. And we will come back to it in the next presentations. But for example, if you want to have a greenhouse gas inventory, the first trip that you should have to do is to the National Statistical Office. I don't know if there is somebody in the room from the National Statistical Office, but this is very good. This is what we keep telling parties to do, to speak first with the National Statistical Office. You will get probably 60, 70, 80% of the data from the Statistical Office. But you also have to consider that the statistical offices in many countries are under-resourced, understaffed. They have issues with funding like other government institutions. So do not think that they will give you everything, because they do not have. It's not that they don't want, they don't have in many cases. And I will give you a simple example or two examples. You will have to report the emissions from the transportation sector. The first thing, you will go to the statistical office. The statistical office will give you most probably the number of cars. It's not sufficient, but this is how much they collect. For you to do more, to be able to report this information, the emissions, you will need to know a little bit more on the engines, on the capacity, and so on. So what you'll have to do is to go to in every country, there is a agency or bureau for car registration, where it gives the number plates and so on. This car registration bureau, for sure, they have information on the engines, on the different types of car, and this is what you will need. So again, this is the first example. The second one, which is also quite important, is the fluorinated gases, the F gases. I think most of the countries, the statistical offices do not collect this information, because for them, it doesn't bring anything. There's no value for them to collect this information, but you need it because this is quite powerful greenhouse gases, and you need to estimate emissions. So what happened in other countries is that if you're not producing these gases in the country, and in many countries, especially developing countries, this is the situation. These gases are not produced. They are just imported and consumed. So if they are not produced in the country, for sure, they are imported to be used. So if you go to the customs office in many countries, you might be surprised to see that they have a lot of information on the types of gases that are imported, and then you will need to figure out how they are used in the country. But at least you have some information. And I was asked last week in a similar event that we had in Baku about this way of what happens if we don't have the full time series from 1990 of information. There are ways to do this. There are ways in the IPCC methodology to make sure that you can address the gaps into the time series. So again, this is now a shell requirement for parties to use the 2006 IPCC methodology, IPCC guidelines. So the guidelines also gives you the ways of finding this information. This is quite like, we keep saying also, and you will see my colleagues presenting the reporting tools. And those reporting tools are not going to sit to be the ones that are, how can I explain it better? We are still working on the reporting tools, but this doesn't stop you. And more than that, there should be an encouragement from me now to tell you that you can already start working on preparing your emissions, preparing your emission estimates, preparing your reports, because the tools will come and help you to report, but the estimates need to be done before. So it is quite important for parties to start working already. You don't need to wait for the tools. The tools will be coming at the end of June. And there will be sufficient training like the ones that we will do these days for parties to know how to use the tools. Coming back to the slide on the fundamentals of the ETF, it's this idea of continuous improvement that I have explained, the different starting points for different countries, and two concepts that one of them was embedded in the Paris Agreement, in the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, these flexibility arrangements for the for parties, for developing countries that need it. And when my colleagues will be presenting the technical aspects for the greenhouse gas inventory, for the NDC, they will explain more about the flexibility conditions. And I don't want to enter too much into the details now. The support is exactly what we have discussed. There's support coming from developed countries. There's support coming from different UN agencies. This is part of this global effort to make sure that parties are able to report. And this is happening. We do as much as possible to be in the countries, to participate in this kind of events, to do trainings, exactly for this idea. Now, this is to illustrate the flexibility and the continuous improvement over time, the things that what I was explaining. You see that parties are, the state of the countries reporting are this thing on the left, where different countries are in different states. But the idea over time is this improvement of parties to come under the same standards. There will be a certain time in the future when parties will be operating at the same kind of standards, the same kind of level. Even flexibility that was embedded in implementing the ETF will probably decrease. There will be maybe many countries that will be requesting this flexibility for the first BTR. But maybe the time we reach the fifth BTR or the fourth BTR, there will be less and less countries requesting this flexibility because they managed to put this together, as I said, to have institutional arrangements in the country to be able to report every 2 years better and better. Now, as I said about this flexibility that my colleagues will explain in more detail, we are looking at flexibility in terms of the scope of reporting, like how many gases, for example. For developing countries that need flexibility, for them, mandatory is to report CO2, CH4, and N2O, like carbon dioxide, methane, and peroxide of nitrogen peroxide. So it's the three main gases. The F gases and other gases could be, it's not mandatory, the flexibility of to report it. Then frequency of reporting, the level of detail of reporting, the scope of the review, all these things are aspects where developing countries have this flexibility of how to report. And again, my colleagues in the next days will explain to you this more in more detail. Now, in terms of the benefits of the enhanced transparency framework, and some of them we have already raised here, but they are quite important to see also why we are doing this. It's not because we want all the parties to, and especially ministries of environment or agencies, to have this tough time because they need to report to the UNFCCC Secretariat. It's not that. If you look at the benefits on the national level, first of all, we see this political acceptance. And also looking here, we had the minister here with us. The minister was talking about the the tools, was talking about the enhanced transparency framework. This is one of the important things in countries. It's to reach this kind of level in which the discussion goes to the ministerial level. So we had presidents coming to the conference of parties lately, especially after Paris. We see at all the conference of parties that we organize, we have 10, 20, 100 presidents. So the topic reached that level. And this is important, and this is part of this benefits of the enhanced transparency framework, to have the political acceptance. Then if you look, it's also about the policy planning, because you need information to be able to provide, to look at your development as a country. You need all this information, you need data, you need information of where the emissions are coming, what are your plans for the implementing of the NDC, what is behind your NDC. For this, you need data. Then the thing that is probably the most important for developing countries is the access to support. I keep saying it's very hard to go to a donor, either be it a country or development bank or a private sector donor, to say that you need support. The first question that you will get is, on what? What do you need? Show, like, and you will say, well, I want to reduce emission in the transportation sector, because we were talking about transport. And the donor will ask you, what do you have there? Like, what are your emissions? What do you want to do? Show me this. This cannot go without the data. And this is also part of this implementation of the enhanced transparency framework. This is why you will be doing that. It's not just for reporting. If it would have been for reporting, this would have been really a very cumbersome process. But from this, you will have benefits, especially at the national level. The thing that I was talking about, the capacity that you build in the country. I know I'm also coming from a country 20 years ago, we had similar issues. There's not sufficient staff in the Ministry of Environment or agencies, but this is improving. As long as ministers understand that this is a very important topic, they will bring more resources. And this is something that is important. There will be capacity built at the statistical office, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Agriculture. People will start to understand that their topic is important for reporting under the climate process, for knowing more about the emissions in the, let's say, agriculture sector or transport sector. And part of this is, of course, everything related with the awareness that is raised. Now, if you look on the other side, on the international level, what are the benefits on the on providing this information and participating under the ETF? Is, first of all, the trust built between countries. Now we have these reporting requirements for all countries. So you will have countries from your region, you will have countries from different regions of the world reporting this. This creates this database of information from all countries, and parties will start building trust. Because I keep saying the nationally determined contributions were plans that were put by countries. Nobody intervened in the Kyrgyzstan NDC to tell Kyrgyzstan what to do. It was a decision by Kyrgyzstan, for example, or other countries in the region, what they want to do under this process of climate action to make sure that we are following the objectives of the Paris Agreement. But now you have to show what has been done, because that's the first step. As I said, the first is the planning. It's the NDC and what parties plan and propose to do. But then you have the first BTR, you have the Enhanced Transparency Framework, in which you show this is what we did. And then parties will start having this trust. Oh, it's not only me doing that, it's other countries are also doing that. So that's part of the trust built between countries. Then you will also show that you are meeting your obligations under the Paris Agreement. And overall, this process, this is why we have the global stocktake, that every 5 years, we look where we are. And it was not quite promising looking at the last NDCs of where we are. All countries need to do more. And part of it is this ambition enhancement. And ambition enhancement can come only when you have data. If we don't know, and if we don't have the data, it will be very hard to say, oh, we want to do more, but we don't know what we did until now. But this is why I'm saying the next global stocktake will already be fueled by 2 biennial transparency reports. So we will have 2 cycles of biennial transparency reports until the next global stocktake. So at the next global stocktake that we have in 5 years, the idea will be more clear of where we are. The last thing, and it's not it's probably one of the most important, is the support that is prioritized. As I said, there are a lot of donors, there are a lot of developed countries that want to provide support, but the countries that will have the better data, that will be able to show what they want to do, what they did, and what they want to do, they will get support. There is, in a way, if you look in the world, there is a battle between countries to get support. And this is also going to benefit from you being able to provide this information. So you provide this information, it's easier, as I said, to go to a donor and request support. Now, this is something that my colleague Nashib will probably present in more detail. I think it's later today and tomorrow in how we have linked these common reporting tables into the new tools. And you will see the new tools are quite nice to see the way they work, but he will be able to explain to you more. I just put it here for you to have this idea that the reporting part is quite complex. And we have all these tables. Only if I'm looking here, you have 2 types of table, but there are like 65 tables only for the emissions. So there's quite a heavy process of reporting emissions. But we tried in the new tools to do it simple, to make it simple for users. And you will see that I don't want to spoil, my colleagues will get upset because I'm spoiling their presentations. So I don't want to do that. You will see more in the next couple of days of how this look like. Similarly, with the tabular formats for the information that needs to be reported for tracking progress, similar tables with data. Again, you will see them in the presentation of the tool, and the same for the last set of tables. I think in total we have, for all 3 sets of data, we have around 80 or 80 something, 85 tables. So it is quite heavy. We know that it is a burden for countries, and you will see what we did with the tools. We try to make it simple. Now, in terms of the outline of the biennial transparency report, because you will have to provide information, not only the data, the tables, and so on. You will have the biggest part of the biennial transparency report is a narrative. So it's a text explaining all these numbers, explaining what is behind. And you see on the left, this is the outline of what the biennial transparency report should consist of. As I mentioned, national GHG inventory, the progress in implementing the NDC, impacts and adaptation if it's part of the reporting, the support provided, and other information for the things that were submitted jointly. And then you have like the flexibility, the improvements on reporting, annexes. This is all part of the biennial transparency report. And there is a quite specific outline included in the decision. Then The national inventory document, similarly, you need to have an executive summary. And then, as I mentioned, the national circumstances, the institutional arrangements, it is important. It's not, how can I say, the idea to have them is not prescribed in the Paris Agreement. There's no one set of arrangements that is good for all countries. In some countries, and I'll give you, I think, 2 examples. For example, Finland is probably the most advanced in terms of these institutional arrangements. They decided that the National Statistical Office is the agency in charge of estimating and reporting emissions. They thought that's their idea, that because the information is mostly collected in the statistical office, they decided that the statistical office is the one that will be in charge. And they are in charge not only for estimating emissions, but also reporting to UNFCCC. But that's only one country. I think Turkey is also thinking about, and there is more work in the process from the statistical office. I think it's quite similar for Turkey. Other countries, most of the other countries is either the Ministry of Environment or the Agency of Environment is in charge of estimating emissions and reporting to Climate Change Secretariat. So this is how different the things are. As I said, in some countries, there is this National Commission for Climate Change in which the main ministers are participating, and they have different ways of working together. In other countries, they work based on memorandum of understanding, or in even more in some countries, there is this law of how the work, these arrangements should work. So now, again, you have everything into this national inventory document, the trends in greenhouse gas emissions, and then you take sectors one by one. And again, my colleagues will also show you how these sectors come into place in the new tools. But on top of the information that you will put in the new tools, you will also have this report in which you will have to explain what is behind the numbers. So for every set of data that you send, you also need to have a narrative for you to explain. This is in terms of the comprehensive reporting in the BTRs. And you can see on the slide what happened on until now. For example, countries had to report greenhouse gas emissions, national communication, biennial reports. On the left side was the developed countries. On the right side, you have the developing countries that had to report biennial update reports and national communications. And you see how different aspects were requested until now in different reports. And you see, for example, national circumstances until now were only requested to be reported by the developed countries. But now in the biennial transparency reports, this is also a requirement. The same for the targets and progress made. Until now, this was reported only in the biennial reports from the developed countries. But now, again, this will be part of the biennial transparency report. Policies and measures were also requested for the developing countries. So this is not something new for the developing countries. They were asked to provide this information. But in the case of projections, again, this was not happening for the developing countries. It was only for developed. Looking at the financial, technology, and capacity building support needed and received, this was part of the developing countries reporting until now. This will continue to be part of the BTR as explained. And similarly, with the developed countries, they also had to report that, and they will continue to report that. Other things regarding adaptation, as you can see, it's quite clear now in the Biennial Transparency Report on the impacts and adaptation that should be provided by countries. It's a should requirement, and the rest of the other things that used to be reported. Now, REDD+ is also something that will be requested to be provided by the countries that are using this REDD+, the deforestation aspects. Now, moving slowly to the part on the reporting tools. These reporting tools that you will see in the next days, these are not alone into the process. You see, these are kind of interlinked with the review procedures and tools, with the training and capacity building programs for experts, and having these technical experts for reporting and international review. As I mentioned before, all the reports will need to be reviewed. And some of you here at the table will be reviewers. As long as you participate in the training and you pass an exam, you can be a reviewer. You can be asked to go to a country. It will be a very random thing. You come from Kyrgyzstan and you will go to review Andorra or Switzerland. This is how it works. You will be an independent expert that will review the Biennial Transparency Report of another country. We are looking for experts. So as long as you can do that, please take the trainings, take the exams, and be a reviewer. It's quite important because you will ask me why some of the countries, even in your region, and I will give you an example. For example, here, Moldova. Moldova has quite advanced with their reporting because they have 5 or 6 experts that are participating regularly in the reviews, because these kind of reviews were also happening until now for the developed countries. And in the developed countries, every year, their greenhouse gas inventory and regularly the national communication biennial reports were being reviewed. And experts from developing countries were invited to review developed countries. And this is how they learned. And they went back home and said, we also can do that. We should also do that. So this is what I was giving the example of Moldova. They are quite advanced. And I'm pretty sure that they will be able to provide their biennial transparency report and national inventory because they had these experts that were going every year to see and to review other countries, especially until now developed countries. So it is important to be a reviewer because it's not only that you go and check another country, you also learn. You speak with other people like you that are involved in the preparation of the biennial transparency reports or reports of greenhouse gas emissions, and you interact with other parties, you interact with other colleagues from the world, and from this you improve. You come back home and say, oh, I've seen that in this agriculture sector, that country was using a higher tier methodology because they had data on different types of cows. Maybe we can also have that in the country. And then you go and you look for this data, and you might be surprised to figure out that you have this data, and you just need to use it. So this is how it works with the experts. This is how it works of being a reviewer. So this process, this is how the improvement comes. This is how this process benefits. And you have to consider that this review is not a punishment. And I think we passed that moment. I remember the first time, so I'm originally from Romania. And the first time we submitted the report to the Secretariat, we asked for a review because we did not know how it is. It was the first time we were reporting. It was, I think, 20 years ago. And the moment we received the acceptance, and the experts came to Romania to check the greenhouse gas inventory report. And I remember the last day usually of this review. So this review happens in 1 week. At the end of the review, you have a set of recommendations for the party, what to do. And I remember in the last day, we invited the state secretary from like a minister, like a deputy minister, to see the final results, and some directors from the ministry. And of course, it was the first time we were reporting. There were issues. There were many issues. And the experts put this presentation in which they showed the issues. And of course, the reaction from the high level was that you're not doing your job. Like, look how many issues you have, like how many problems. But this is not the case. This should not work like this. People should understand that experts are coming to provide these future improvements that you need to do. These are just recommendations. And these recommendations should be taken in that way that in some cases you will be able to do it next year, or you will have to put something together to do it in the next 5 years. But again, we have moved from that thing, and we keep saying that this is a non-punitive, punishment type of process. These reviews are for countries to get better. You have different resources, and we just wanted to show you that we are preparing all these manuals, this how to report. There's this consultative group of experts that also provided these technical manuals for countries. So there is sufficient bibliography, sufficient technical documentation provided by the Secretariat, or even by our partner agencies. Like, we work with UNDP, with UNEP. They have also worked to support countries. And again, I have to be very grateful for our partners, because otherwise we won't be able to be here. It's quite complicated for the Secretariat to be in many places, especially in this period. So we have different, and information is available. You just need to ask for it. You just need to look for it. Now, so that we are setting more the scene on the reporting tools, I have a few slides on this. So what happened with the process? We basically say that there are three. Again, I'm coming back to the idea of 3 steps. First of all, we have the Paris Agreement, in which parties decided to have this transparency framework, this enhanced transparency framework. And by the way, it is called enhanced transparency framework because the transparency framework was also before. It was just called MRV. It was just called measurement, reporting, verification, but it was there. So now what parties did in Paris was to make it better, make this reporting requirements, review process, the so-called enhanced transparency framework, make it better. So this is why it's called enhanced transparency framework. So that was Paris. Then further down in the negotiation, parties decided that they need a bit more of explanations of how this enhanced transparency framework should work. And this is this decision 18 from CMA1, which is the COP that happened in Katowice. There is this modalities, procedures, and guidelines of how to implement the ETF. On top of this, parties said, this is not sufficient. We also need to know of how to report. So what happened in Katowice in this decision 18 CMA1, parties put together this what to report. So what will be the information that needs to be reported by parties? And this is in the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. But then they figured out that they need a bit more time to work together to develop these tables, the reporting tables. And it happened 2 more years after, which is, I think, 3 more years after, because we had the pandemic and we had COP that didn't happen. So in Glasgow in 2021, end of 2021, parties at the COP, they decided that the tables are adopted. So they managed to adopt 3 sets of tables, the one that I showed before, the common reporting tables for inventories, and the common tabular formats for progress and for support. And these are translated now into the new tools that you will see in the next days. On top of this, the parties decided that the Secretariat should provide these reporting tools, first of all, as a test version, the one that we have today, that you see today, and then the final version by June this year. So by June, we have to provide the final version. At the same time, we need to organize this kind of technical trainings and to facilitate the interoperability with the IPCC software that my colleague Nashib will show in the presentation, in his presentation on the inventory. Now, why this process was extremely complicated, and you will see in the matter of how the tools operate, of the complexity of these tools. First of all, it's there was this idea to support the global stocktake, the NDC cycle, to use this common framework. And so we have 3 tools. They all look quite similar, and they have this common approach and framework that is behind them. So to make it easier for the parties that don't have a lot of resources to be able to use these 3 tools. Then, as I said, we are not starting from our side in the Secretariat, we did not start from zero. So we had kind of similar tools in the past, and we used the knowledge from developing them to develop the new tools. But then we needed more skills. We needed more IT skills, because these are IT tools that you will see. And the biggest problem in organizing this project and, let's say, implementing and finalizing this project was the technical complexities. First of all, the parties asked us for this to work also offline. And you will see, my colleagues will show you in the next days that the tools are online tools. But the moment you are disconnected from the internet, you can continue to work. You get back the connection, the information is synchronized back. So this is one of the things that we had to consider. Another one was this flexibility provisions. And you will see how complex this process came to be based on the request from parties to be able to report only some gases, or to choose different types of flexibility in their reporting. More than that, many countries are using the IPCC software. I don't know how many of the countries present today, but we will figure out in the next days, are using the IPCC software to estimate their emissions. In some countries, they use their national system. But in many countries, in many developing countries, they still use the IPCC software, which is a good thing, because this will give you a good way of interacting with the tools that we are developing. So there will be a way of taking the information from the IPCC software and put it into our tools in a very simple way, that you won't even need to do much. You will need to press 3 buttons. I won't stay much on this on the technology side. What I wanted to point out is that the tools are new. So there was this idea maybe to use old tools or to change the tools that we had, and we said no. It is Paris Agreement, it is 21st century. We wanted to have new tools that are built from scratch. This is why also it was quite complex to find the right technology, the open standards, the security of the information, to have the user-friendly interface. We say that, again, from our point of view, the tools are self-explanatory. So the moment you open, you will probably, after getting a little bit used with it, you will know what to do. It will be quite simple to say, oh, this is the part of it. As long as you have been involved with the inventory before or with reporting information and you have the decision next to you, you will know what to do. But again, trainings are needed, and this is what we are doing in these days. I think it's sufficient now for the technology. It's not important to know more about this. It's important to see them. So I think it's quite heavy in terms of what is behind. You don't need to know what is behind, but for parties to understand why there was this request for funding, because more than that, we did not have funding for this project. We had to constantly request parties to fund the project. And the same here, if you look at the circle, you need to make sure that you have a calculation of data, metadata, import, export, reporting, storage, everything needs to be behind of what you see. So what you see is just the interface, is just how you interact with the tools. But what is behind, we have to have these engines, these 7 engines that are working behind to make sure that the data is stored, that you can do an import and export. And this will be explained in the next days by my colleagues. Now, what happened with the tools? As I said, the deadline for us was last year to provide parties with the test version. And this happened the first time on 15th of August. We have provided the first test version. We asked parties to provide 3 users. And I was constantly asked, why 3? Why we cannot have 10? It's because if you multiply 3 with 200 parties, it's already 600 users. And it's quite hard to handle users that are testing the tools and are providing the same bug in the application that we have already found that it is there. So that was the whole idea behind limiting the users per party. Currently, we have around 550 users from parties, from around 160 parties. I'm very curious, and I'm looking at my colleague Gopal, if there's anyone in the room, any country in the room that doesn't have users, because this is what we are currently doing. We are pushing countries to provide these users. There are 20, 30 countries that still don't have users. And every time we are going now to different trainings, we are pushing countries to do that, because even that you don't have a lot of time to play with it, to test it, it is important to open it, to see what is there, to see how it works, to put some numbers that are random numbers, to see that they are adding up the numbers and so on. Because the moment will come after 1st of July in which the tools will be final and you will need to work with them. So this is what happened end of last year. We had the training similar like this, but with the first version of the tool. And then before the COP in Dubai, we had another release, which was better than the first one. And then we had a lot of trainings in Dubai. We had like 15 or 16 sessions of trainings for all tools, in which we trained 500 people. And then we had a set of submissions from parties. Some parties, they were asked in the same division, in the same decision, to provide their views. And we received about 11 submissions from different parties of what they like and what they don't like in the tools. So now the last release happened in April. So last month we had the final test version release. So the one that you see these days is almost the last version. We are still working on some critical aspects that need to be solved. We still have some technical bugs in the application, and we still need to find a way to do a bulk import. But we are close to the final version of the tools that will be released on 30th of June. This you will see, and I'm not, in the interest of time, also I'm not going to sit on this one. You will see from my colleagues what is the scope of the test version, the last one, what is behind each of the tool. So now you see we are using the 3 tools. They are called GAG Inventory, Progress, and Support, because there were a lot of abbreviations. And if we started with this abbreviation, one of the tools would have been CTF FTC, which is like a lot of letters that were too complicated. So we decided to have 3 simple names. One of the tools will be the one for inventory, where you will put your emissions. Then the progress one is where you put the work on your NDC progress. And the support is the one with money. What is to be done? And this is my last slide. As I told you, there is this IT development that is still working for the remaining functionalities and the bugs that we are fixing. We continue to collaborate with IPCC. It was a strong request from parties to make sure that the 2 applications work together. And this will also be shown at the subsidiary bodies negotiations that we have in June in Bonn. Doing the technical training workshops like the one that we have here, then virtual question and answer sessions. And again, the big plan, the big milestone is to complete the release of the official final version of the ETF reporting tools in June. I'm not going to say here that we are still engaging with parties and donors for having sufficient resources to complete the work of the tools. And I will stop here because I think it's quite important to interact on this. If you have questions, any type of questions, don't be shy. Just ask.